Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here for our Sunday night show, Mandatory Fun Time. I am here with an amazing content creator by the name of Charlie Knight, who is recommended by our community, specifically Twinkle Toes, who's in chat right now, who is super, super hyped to check this out. And yeah, so thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then, perfect. So we'll go ahead and roll right into it. Could you take a moment to introduce who Charlie Knight is and what your brand is?
Sure. I'm Charlie. They, them pronouns, please. I'm an editor for indie authors. I'm also a science fantasy writer. I'm a mom, a trans non binary person. I'm an absolute disaster queer. Um, I love dark colors, soft hoodies, food, gaming. I love all things cryptid and monsters and space and aliens, but I want to make them all as queer as possible. Um, my brand is a mix of sending as many good vibes into the universe as I can,
Mm-hmm.
combined with,
We're all about that. Yes.
yes, combined with kind of a take no trash, if you will, attitude. Um, and then just a dash of complete and utter dork. Um, I try to be as honest and authentic as I can all the time. I think being really open about myself is a huge part of my brand, especially as a neurodivergent person and a disabled person and a trans non-binary person. So that's me.
That's amazing. Got to give it up for the writer homies and those who are fighting for more inclusivity and like more representation in our community. That we love to see it. So it's always super super cool. And
Yeah.
I'm a fellow writer myself. And I'm an avid, as you can probably tell with like running a geek website and all this sort of stuff. I'm a sweaty nerd when it comes to like Warhammer and like World of Warcraft and all the good like final or fantasy stuff. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that you also enjoy that stuff. So that's awesome. And
absolutely. The geekier, the better. Yeah.
right? So yeah, what I'm very interested into knowing is what is your origin story? How did Charlie Knight become Charlie Knight as a writer and all that kind of stuff? Like, where did someone teach you, or did you just pick up a pen one day and was like, "Yo, I love the written word," and go for it?
um, origins aren't, great. There's a lot of trauma behind me, a lot
Yeah.
of abuse from family and past partners and ex-friends and just kind of every way. And ever since I can remember, writing was a huge escape for me,
Mm-hmm.
from that, just letting me get out of this world and into a better one. I was in elementary school when I started writing fairy tale retellings and when I was writing Buffy the Vampire Slayer fanfic. So it's kind of always been my go-to. Um, I did I lost it for a while in high school. Things were just bad. I let that piece of myself go,
Mm-hmm.
and then in college I went for English language and literature, which of course you hear all the jokes like, "Oh, my plumber's an English major," hilarious. But it was really important for me to be in spaces with other queer writers
Yeah.
and neurodivergent writers and writers who didn't look like everyone I saw on bookshelves all the time. So that's when I started editing and just really expanding my knowledge and getting my hands on everything that I could, especially if it was written by someone marginalized, written by someone who is silenced by traditional publishing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people silenced by traditional publishing, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, and then I got on a Twitter in like 2018, which is pretty late to the game. Um, but I came on with this idea of starting my own editing business and brand that focused solely on indie authors, but on
Mm-hmm.
actually making editing at a professional level accessible and affordable to indie authors.
Yeah.
Um, and it's all just stayed the same. Writing is still my go-to escape. It's
Yeah.
still my primary source of self-care, and I every time I get to like sit down with a queer writer or a writer of color and just build their world, build their story, expand their voice,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a dream come true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like definitely taking and I relate to this on a lot of levels, you know, because I'm a proud brown man, and I definitely understand the struggle of not enough representation or inclusivity in, like, you know, a lot of mediums.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's amazing when you actually get to, like, you know, take the bull by the horns essentially, or, you know, be the change you want to see in the world, and be that help to indie authors and writers to let them get to that level that will get them noticed, and, you know, to polish their work and all that kind of stuff without like stomping on it or being like, whoa, I like this character or I like this book, that you got to change these characters because they're, you know, LGBTQ or they're, you know, minorities or whatever, which we see it too
Right.
many times. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
Even just little things like traditional publishing, they're still italicizing most languages that aren't English.
yeah.
Your characters are instantly othered in that moment. And I, you know, indie publishing has this super unique opportunity to like you said, grab the bull by the
Yeah.
horns and really just create a space where marginalized writers especially can flourish.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then,
Yeah.
okay, cool. So, I always love this question. So, as a content creator, we can often find ourselves working beyond our limits and ultimately burning out. What are some of your own self care techniques that you've like learned to utilize and everything to ensure that your mental health is like taken care of?
If my friends or my husband are watching this, they're laughing right now. I'm notoriously bad at taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm not good at it. I don't automatically kind of like prioritize myself.
Yeah.
Um, and I, you know, there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of things that I was told that I'm still hanging on to that I'm working through.
Yeah.
And so my relationship with self care is very, very new. Um, in a lot of ways, it's accountability has been
Yeah.
really important for me. So I send good morning messages out every day on Twitter, and usually they're just like, I try to be uplifting. Sometimes they're like innocuous hot takes because I really enjoy chaos.
Yeah.
But pretty often it's something that I'm struggling with.
Hmm.
So like a really simple example, if I tell everyone to hydrate their meat suit,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there knowing very well that I have no idea what my last drink of water was.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel accountable to people, and I have to get up and I have to go get a drink of water. If
Yeah.
you're gonna do it, I'll do it, you know? So that's accountability has been a huge part of it for me. When I do manage self-care, um, I've tried to step out of writing a little bit for it,
Yeah.
just because now that I'm editing full time and I'm writing all these things, I'm like constantly in that mode. So I've tried to like pull myself out for something else, and
Hmm.
I'm gaming's been absolutely my favorite
Yeah.
resource for that. It's another form of escapism, you know.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. I get to step out of this world and into another one, which is why I'm such a big fan of RPGs and games
Hmm.
that are super heavy on storytelling. That's and character development. That's kind of it's the writer in me who gets to play
Yeah.
video games. So that's been a huge part of like my growth and my health at this moment.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I completely relate to that because, like you said, video games and other things like Dungeons and Dragons, or, you know, whatever other mediums that are, we can just take ourselves away from this world for just a bit in a healthy way, you know,
Mm-hmm.
are pretty amazing because there's definitely a lot of hard times, and I love how. I don't know if this is how your upbringing was, but for me at least, video games were very looked down upon. Like, you're wasting your time. That's nothing, you know, that's gonna help you at all. And then really, it was like the best piece of therapy I could get, other than, you know, exercise or whatever, you know, by just being a blood elf walking around different places. So it was like pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or sometimes honestly just getting to go wild and
Yeah.
like tear up some enemies. Like
Yeah.
it, you know, sometimes you need that. And I think it's really cool now too that not only are more of us talking about gaming and it's
Hmm.
becoming so much a bigger thing, but now it's like the cool thing. Like these were things I got made fun of for
Hmm.
as a kid, and now I get to like connect with people, and I'm still just kind of amazed by
Yeah.
the culture shift.
Yeah, it's been a wild change. It's been very fast, but thankfully, I really appreciate you being vocal on Twitter because I've like followed your Twitter and all this kind of stuff, and I see your posts, and you always have great takes on things, and you're just being that megaphone for the topics that need to be discussed,
Yeah.
and being that voice. Yeah, while everyone else is like trying to be quiet and not get like playing it safe and all that kind of stuff, you choose to say the right thing and do the right thing for people who are struggling. So it's like I really appreciate that about you. Yeah, it was good.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right, cool. And then, so we know that you have accomplished so much during your career over all this time of being an editor and a writer and everything like that. But you're only human. So, like all humans, there have absolutely had to been times that you had L's. Now, usually L's stand for losses. But in the very first interview that I did, that sticks with me the entire time, the woman that I interviewed, Eliana Murillo, said, L's no longer stand for losses, they stand for lessons. So, what would you consider to be one of your biggest L's that you learned from and grew from? And what was that hardship that you had to like get through in order to get that hard earned wisdom?
I think I think the biggest one very recently,
Yeah.
and probably the most public one, was having to learn that even though I am an advocate and I tend to be a fighter and I want to help people and I want to fix things when I see a problem, I had to learn that sometimes to be an advocate and an ally, you have to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It requires giving space. And it was a hard thing for me. I think especially in the last couple of years, for example, with the Black Lives Matter movement,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm super passionate about it. There's nothing more important going on right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I very rarely speak about it in my own words. I share words from Black people. I
Yeah.
share words, or I'll send someone, if someone comes to me for a question, I'll send them to a Black person to ask
Mm-hmm.
instead. And that was tough for me. I had to get told basically to shut up and to stop taking that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's hard for a lot of us. I see it so often with allies for the trans community.
Mm-hmm.
People want to stand up and fight for us, and that's great. But it often silences us,
Mm-hmm.
and our voices are the ones that need to be heard. That's definitely like, biggest lesson. It was a
Yeah.
real kick in the ass, and it was super important.
Yeah, and that's such an important one, and so like hard to learn, because you want to do things to make the world a better place and to fight the good fight, but then it's also finding that like line and those sort of boundaries that no one teaches you. You only learn when you mess up, and you're like, "Oh, now it's very clear to me." So I
Yeah,
completely understand that. Yeah, and even if you may have gotten quote unquote like scolded or whatever, like I appreciate you doing what you did, and just being a voice, because there's a lot of
yeah,
people who are simply silent and quiet and just watch the world burn while nothing. So at least doing something is better than just sitting by and doing
yeah,
nothing. And but still I completely understand where you're coming from that,
yeah.
because I struggle with
Like
that
you said, it.
Go for it.
No, go ahead. Sorry, you struggle.
Yeah, I struggle with that a lot when it comes to a lot of my cousins and friends are a part of the LGBTQ community, and when something like someone goes after them, I try to like stand up for them, but I also know that sometimes that fight isn't my fight, and I just can't, I gotta do what I can to support them, even though I want to tear faces, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's super natural to want to like
Mhm.
dive you both feet into a cause that's important to you, and especially when people are important to you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's exactly what you said. It's finding that boundary. It's
Mhm.
figuring out where the line is between being a voice and being an advocate, which is so important. I'm never going to shut up about it completely, and
Mm.
I don't think that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
But then also, figuring out where my space is
Mhm.
in that fight and making sure that I'm not taking space from somebody who has a voice that belongs there, that needs to be uplifted.
Exactly. Yeah. That's good. And then pivoting on the other end of the spectrum, what would you say one of your favorite W's or wins are that you take the most pride in? Whether it's something at the very beginning that was very small but meant the world to you, or some major accomplishment that you're like, I fucking killed it. So,
um, I mean, stuff like this feels like a huge win for me. Like
Yeah.
it'll always be a huge win for me that people like want to know me.
Yeah.
Every time someone is like, "Oh, I really needed this message today," when I put something like that's a massive, massive win for me.
Yeah.
Um, if I have to brag a little bit,
Do it. This
my
is your
business
space. Yeah.
my business is definitely my biggest win. Um, I went from no platform whatsoever on Twitter a couple years ago when I started, in a industry that's very, very competitive.
Yeah.
Editing is super competitive, and my family was not in a place for me to take a financial risk to really like dive into editing and cut off the other, like, all the freelance jobs that I was doing and really just focus on indie authors. But I did it, and it's just exploded within 6 months. I had
Yeah.
let go of every other contract. Now I'm booked up like months out, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
I get all sorts of amazing reviews, people just feeling really heard. A bunch, I think like 12 of my authors went number one in their categories last week.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's massive. And that's them, that's our win.
Yeah.
Not just specifically mine, but it feels really good. Like, I took this risk on myself,
Yeah.
and here we are. I'm a queer disabled business owner, and that's a big thing
And
now.
thriving. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, that's so cool. And then yeah, because I feel like that's the biggest lesson that I personally learned. Even though it's your interview, I'm going to speak a little bit about this. But in like end of 2020, 2021, the biggest thing that's happened to me is getting over imposter syndrome and just being like, we are worthy. We are valid. We deserve our bank account to be filled from money that we made from our endeavors. Like so it's good to see you did take that chance, that leap of faith, and then you are benefiting from it. And not only that, but yeah, you can absolutely take some of those W's from the authors that are getting number one in the categories because you had a heavy hand in helping them out with that. And like yeah, it's wonderful to hear about that, and that's really really cool. Man, that's so good. And then
Yeah.
is the information for your editing services, everything on your website, like
Yep.
charlieknight.com? Okay, perfect.
Yep. And it's the pin tweet on my Twitter.
Okay, good. Because I know that we have a lot of writers, aspiring authors, or already like independent, authors and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that there's a lot of people who would love to check out your stuff. And
Yeah, me
yeah, so, and what would you say some geeky passions are that fueled you and your creativity that made you who you are today? I know you speak about sci-fi and fantasy, but was there any like things specific, that whether it be TV shows or what have you?
I think I've always just been really drawn to everything that's like weird or unusual or
Hmm.
just not the norm. That's kind of like where I feel home.
Yeah.
And I think that developed very on into like a love of things that are supernatural or fantasy based or science fiction based. Um, and I'm sure there are therapists out there who could have a field day with a trans person relating to monsters, but that's actually pretty true
Yeah.
for me. And not in like the scary monster way, but that like misunderstood outside the
Hmm.
norm way. And sci-fi really did the same thing for me with space. Specific passions. I'm like super well known for like my obsession with Mass Effect.
Yes,
And
Mass
it's
Effect's so good.
yes, and my obsession's gotten much worse now that the remaster is coming.
Right?
Um,
It's so good.
yeah, it's like I said, I'm really into games that are big on character development and storytelling, and that's such a great example of it. And then just like combining all the non-human, and it's everything that I love. And I write a fanfic for it that's active. I think that was probably like, especially because it came out in high school when I was having such a hard time.
Yeah.
Not to myself too much here.
No, you're good.
um
You're good.
I think that was a huge like jump into that realm for me, finding Mass Effect
Yeah.
specifically.
Ah, that's so good. I don't know if it was you that posted it, but I think there was an article going around saying that in Mass Effect 2 they originally had options for same-sex couples, for like specifically Jack, and Jack's my favorite character. Like she is,
Oh,
ah, I love her to death. So everyone's like, rallying for them to add that option into Mass Effect 2, which they absolutely should have because it was dumb that they got pressured to take it out. But it's
So dumb. They need to
yeah.
do that, and they need to let us. They need to let us romance more than just humans
Yeah,
and Liara in the first game. Like
exactly. Yeah, the pretty races,
I want Garrus Vakarian all the way
right?
through. You will be fine. Like
Give me Rex. It's like, so good. So
perfect.
yeah, and I relate to that a lot. As I said before, I think it might be just marginalized, underrepresented communities that really, we all feel the same way. Because when you mentioned that you related a lot, or you or the trans community relates a lot to the monsters or anything like that, I completely understand that. Because as being Chicano, Mexican American, even fourth generation, meaning that I don't have as close ties as my like ancestry or culture than I do someone who just came from Mexico or anything like that. So it's kind of a weird middle place where I'm like not really accepted in the Hispanic community, and I'm not really accepted in like the white community or whatever, even though I'm like full Mexican and everything. But the reason it's weird to me is that being brown in America often results in purse clutching or like very big preconceived notions and all that kind of stuff. So uh, relate a lot to that. So I also love the monsters and everything, especially the stories of the misunderstood characters, because that's exactly what I felt the entire time. I was like, just because I have brown skin doesn't mean that I'm gonna like fight or steal or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's why I love RPGs like Mass Effect, for example, where
yeah,
or Dragon Age or anything like that, where I can make my character with dark skin and they will judge me by the content of my character rather than the color of my skin, and that's like a big thing, so it's like
yeah,
I totally understand, yeah, and relate to that a
yeah.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah, I get that middle ground as well with being non-binary.
yeah,
Um, a lot of people just kind of like expect androgyny from us, and we feel almost like we owe it to them. And the trans community doesn't really know what to do with us, and the rest of the queer community doesn't really know what to do
yeah,
with us. And the cis people certainly don't know what to do with us.
yeah,
They can't even get our pronoun. I absolutely relate to like that, like
yeah,
where exactly do I belong
mm-hmm.
sort of thing. So yeah, and like you said, you can make a character with brown skin, and I can make a character who's not
Yeah,
even human. Like I can get out of this skin that I don't fit
yeah,
in together and just be something totally different. And I think that's so important. I
yeah,
mean, I've got my kid into gaming.
yeah,
Um, he started transitioning last year,
yeah,
um, and I got him into gaming, and that's a big reason why. I'm like, you need to see this. You need to see this world where
yeah,
can be different, and that's okay.
exactly, and it's a beautiful thing, it's super cool. And
Yeah.
then awesome. So let's say you could go back in time to high school Charlie and be like, yo, I want to give you a piece of advice that's going to make your journey a little bit easier. What would that advice be to like your younger self?
I think I think it would have to be just that you don't have to reach a certain point or achieve a certain goal
Yeah,
or get to a certain phase in your life before you're like worthy of love, either from other people or yourself,
yeah,
before you're worthy of self-care. Like whoever you are, wherever you are, high school Charlie was a mess, but high school Charlie was innately exactly as they were worthy.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
very true. Yeah, that it doesn't matter what stage you look at your life, you're always worthy and valid and deserved respect and from your peers and all that kind of stuff, and from
Yeah.
usually ourselves as well. Yeah,
Oh yeah, for sure. I see it so much with authors. You mentioned
mm.
imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
I mean that plagues every single one of us, and I think a
yeah,
big part of it, like we feel like we have to reach a point, we have to do something, whether it's publish or like, be noticed or whatever, to then be worthy of like even just calling ourselves
writers,
authors.
yeah, or authors, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
hmm,
that's there's such like a divide on when we can call ourselves that, and I just don't accept it.
yeah,
You're already worthy.
hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you go to the grocery store. Well, not to bash on them, I guess. But when you go to the grocery store and find like the trashiest novels and everything, and you're like, if they can do this, then I can. I'm definitely worthy. So it's like that's
Yeah.
what usually helps me, it motivates me, and all that kind of stuff. But
And some of my most favorite novels are those trash novels. Like,
that's
oh
awesome.
my goodness.
Yeah, and there's an audience for them. People want that. They're filling a demographic, a market. So it's like that's the other thing that's really cool is that usually I will also be like, will anyone even want a like brown fantasy character? I don't even know. But then I myself want it, so therefore logically there must be other people who want it. So it's like I just got to keep going. Just got to keep like doing this stuff. And
Yeah, there's an audience for you. Keep going.
nice. And then I want to ask one more question because I'm personally curious about it. But as an editor who looks at a lot of different novels and manuscripts and all these different things, what is a piece of advice that you would give to aspiring authors or writers that you commonly see?
Oh, um, actually, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give would be to join or look to a writing community, whether that's online or if there's a writers group around you.
Yeah,
Um, Connect with other writers, share ideas with them. As scary as it is, let them read your early drafts. Um, just having a group of people around you who gets this very unique, very challenging experience
yeah,
um, is so valuable. It's valuable to your story. It's valuable to you as a writer. I really, if I'm giving any piece of advice to a new writer, it's to find other writers, sit down and talk with them about the craft and about your
yeah,
book and about what's hard about this, because other people just don't get it, which is, you know, they can't.
yeah.
But this isn't something, even though you're the only one writing your book, this isn't something that you can or should do alone.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good piece of advice. That's really, really good. A lot of times when authors are asked, like, what piece of advice do you have? They're like, just keep going, But that's a legit something you can actually utilize, to join writers
Yeah.
group and to seek the advice of your peers. So that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
where can we find you online?
Twitter is definitely the best place. On Twitter, I am at C Night Writes. I'm super active on there. My kid is also active on there, and he's far more popular than I am. um,
Nice.
my DMs are open if you just want to talk. If you want to tell me how you found me, if you have questions about your book, I'm there. My website is up as well for anyone, especially if you're a writer. cnightwrites.com. Um, yeah, I'm actually hoping to branch out into maybe streaming on Twitch
Yeah.
and getting that over to TikTok. But for now, definitely come find me on Twitter. That's my home.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to like answer a few of my questions and being here with me. You're amazing in every single way. And oh, that's right. Okay, so before I let you go, I do something with all of my interviews. So I also want to do this with you.
Okay.
Um, so Charlie, we've met because someone in my community had actually suggested you to me, and I fall in love with your content. It's wonderful and amazing, and I love how like open and vocal you are and everything like that. So it's awesome that we're brought together because of that. That you were already shining so bright that someone recommended you, which is really, really cool, and that led us to this moment. But after this moment ends, we're gonna go on our different journeys, and that's gonna, maybe we'll do something in the future together. But for right now, we're together. So I want to tell you that I've seen your work, I've seen your website, I love everything that you do. You are worthy and you are valid, and I want you to like take all of this energy that you have and keep putting it into 2021 and invest in Charlie Knight because you are just incredible. Yeah, and don't ever lose sight of that. Or and I know you mentioned mental health before and everything like that, but just definitely, if Charlie needs to take time away, then you deserve to take time away. Don't even question it. Do what you feel you need to do. And thank you again so much. And I hope you have a
Thank you. You're
yeah.
doing an amazing thing. I loved watching your other. I love this. This is so much fun.
Oh, thank you. And then
Thank
yeah,
you.
perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and just wrap this up. And yes, more self care for Charlie. That's amazing. Thank you again, Twinkle Toes, for suggesting Charlie.